Found you scurvy dogs. My name be Captain Squiggle. Today I'm gonna be telling you guys how to be the best outlaw rogue in the 7 seas. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I'm just getting a little bit too into my RP at the moment. But as my pirate alter ego said, my name is Squiggle and this is my guide to how to play the outlaw rogue coming into Uldia in 8.01 in BFA. In this guide, I'm going to be showing you guys why Rogue is doing so much damage at the moment as the pirate spec and what we can do to maximize our damage. In these videos, I'm going to be quickly talking about the sims, I'm going to be talking about what talents we are going to run, what stats we are running, and most importantly, what Azerite traits we are going to be rocking for the first tier and for our mythic zeros. So without further ado, welcome to my guide and enjoy. So first off, we're going to be looking at the pre-raid sims for the Outlaw Rogue in 8.0.1. Now as you guys can see, the Outlaw Rogue is actually performing quite well, and in fact this is quite a consistent sim compared to what the Outlaw has been in certain other expansions. Now you can see that the maximum spread is actually very high. There are attempts where you are going to get 5 buffs and completely destroy. However, I will say that with the current build, running the new Azerite traits, it is actually quite a bit more consistent than it used to be. Now onto the breakdown of the Outlaw Rogue. So as you guys can see here, the pistol shot is going to be doing a lot of damage, and even between the eyes, especially if we reroll for our shark infested waters or ruthless precision as it is now called. Now the reason why our pistol shot is doing so much damage is because of the new Azerite traits that we are going to be running. If we look in the gear section here, we can see we are running a dead shot, a paradise lost, and another dead shot. Now if you guys have these dead shot Azerite traits on your 340 gear, you will be seeing that it is currently doing about 2,367 damage per trait onto your next pistol shot. This is huge, as it is really going to be shoving our between the eyes up in priority, even over roll of the bones a lot of the time. After this, we are going to see that Paradise Lost is going to help us with a bit of consistency in our rotation. Now, if you get a 1 roll, this pretty much means that you are more inclined to take it depending on how many of these Paradise Lost traits that you have. So, if you want to go for a less RNG build, you can either go for 3 Paradise Lost traits, or you can go for 3 Dead Shots traits, as these do actually reduce the priority of rerolling. So as we can see here, when we compare this to other traits, at the first look, Deadshot doesn't look like it's very good, because when you only have 1 trait of it, it still isn't as efficient to use as Thunderous Blast or Laser Matrix. However, if you get more of these traits or more Paradise Lost traits, this makes it so much better as time goes on, and basically your priority to use your between the eyes is a lot higher than it first was. So as soon as you break into the 3 territory, this becomes our best trait, single target and AoE. This is very exciting to me because the between the eyes just wasn't used over the whole of Antorus until the last pre-patch version was out. So when we ran Slice and Dice, we simply did not use the between the eyes at any time in our rotation. So it felt like a bit of a wasted ability. Next up, I'm going to be talking about what talents we are going to be running for the Outlaw Rogue. So first off, I wanted to say that when it comes to single target or AoE, a lot of these are quite the same because of the way that Blade Flare works. However, there are going to be some intricacies that come when targets are dying with Marked for Death and in burst AoE situations when it comes to Killing Spree. So first off, we are going to be running Quick Draw. Now this is honestly just performing a lot better than the other 2 in this line for single target and AoE. However, I do expect later in the expansion, Ghostly Strike might get revamped and it might become the better trait. After this, I recommend running Acrobatic Strikes over the other 2 talents, simply because it increases the range of your AoE and it allows you to ignore certain mechanics if you are standing at max range. I think having extra range on your abilities and melee attacks is very valuable on a melee DPS, and honestly it just makes it feel a lot better than a lot of the other classes and specs in the game. So if you haven't tried it, I recommend learning the limits with this spec as it is very good. Next up, we are going to see that Vigor is going to be our best for single target. However, if you have targets dying around you, such as Mythic Plus or ad fights, you're going to find that smart use of Mark for Death will in fact become better. So what I like to do in Mythic Zeros, I like to make sure that I'm marking the lowest target in the group. I'm doing a roll before the pull, and then I'm making sure that as soon as this dies, I put it onto the next lowest one, and then I just keep on rattling through those combo point using abilities. After this, for most things we are going to be running Cheat Death. I like this in World Questing, and I like this in Mythic Zeros. And honestly, I think I would run it in Mythic Plus and Raids for pretty much most of the time. So of course, this tier hasn't really changed much from last expansion, but Elusiveness and Iron Stomach probably do have their roles. After this, I recommend going Prey on the Weak 100% of the time, unless you need Blinding Powder for certain mechanics in your raiding. So Prey on the Weak is fantastic. It gives you another 10% damage to the targets that you between the eyes for 6 seconds. Now in Mythic Zeros and Mythic Plus alike, this is actually huge. Like, you can really feel the damage that you're doing with this, especially because between the eyes is not a damage loss when you're using it on these targets. In fact, it is a DPS gain if you are using it at the right times. After this, we are running our Alacrity in tier 90. Now, some people do like running Slice and Dice for the consistency. However, I can say if you do run the correct build, you shouldn't need to use Slice and Dice. And the haste from Alacrity is simply a lot stronger than the Slice and Dice is. Loaded dice, it might become a bit better when we have a little bit more haste. However, I do not think it is necessary at this point. Last but not least, we are going to see that Blade Rush is going to be our best for single target, and our Killing Spree is going to be the best for burst AoE. I will note, however, that Killing Spree is really awkward to use in a lot of situations, as it locks you in and really screws with your camera for about 2 seconds. However, in certain scenarios, this is just really needed in like big pulls in Mythic Plus and stuff, and practicing with this ability will really pay dividends in the long run. And however, Dancing Steel is just not up to par with these two talents, and you should pretty much never take it. Now, here are going to be the sims for the single target in HeroDamage.com. Now, obviously we can see that Vigor is going to be our best over a 5-minute fight. However, if you are running a shorter fight or the fights do have things that die, Mark for Death is very close behind with only minus 0.7% DPS. I will also add that it is quite nice to be able to roll before a pull and to be able to reset things throughout the pull and, you know, get these free roll the bones as such. And then after this, we can see that the Killing Spree is about 1% behind, and thus on certain boss fights we are still going to be running Killing Spree. Next up, we are going to be briefly looking over our opener for the Outlaw Rogue. Now obviously with the inclusion of the GCDs in our opener, we are going to see that Adrenaline Rush has to be timed correctly, as well as Blade Rush, to make sure that we aren't overcapping our energy. So what I recommend doing on the opener is ambushing, blade rushing, then vanish, ambushing, adrenaline rushing, and then sinister striking before using your next roll the bones. Now obviously this is going to be slightly different if you are using Killing Spree. If you are using Killing Spree, you would do this exactly the same. However, you would just make sure that you use your vanish about 3 seconds into the fight rather than about 2 seconds in. So this is going to change a little bit as well when it comes to Mark for Death. You want to be using your Mark for Death roughly 10 to 18 seconds before the pull happens, and then you just want to be making sure that when the pull is about to happen, you are just rolling the bones and hoping that you get a pretty good buff. After this, the rotation does get a little bit nitty gritty. So there are times when you want to be re-rolling your bones, there are times when you want to be using your dispatch over your between the eyes, and there are times when you want to be using your between the eyes over everything else. Now, between the eyes, when you have the dead shot relics, actually becomes the #1 priority, even over using roll the bones to re-roll bad buff selections. Next up, I'm going to be talking about how to do these re-rolls. So this is going to be talking about without Paradise Lost, the Azerite trait. You want to be making sure that if you have Grand Melee or Ruthless Precision, or you're using 2 buffs at the same time, you are not rerolling at all. You are only going to be rerolling if you have the 4 other single buffs and nothing else. And after this, I want to also say that if you have Ruthless Precision, it bumps our Between the Eyes even higher in priority, so that even if you don't have any of these Deadshot traits, you are going to make sure that you are still using your Between the Eyes off cooldown. After these 2 abilities, of course, you want to be making sure that you're using your Dispatch when you reach 4 or 5 CPs, and you want to make sure that you're using your Blade Rush or your Adrenaline Rush before you use your combo point spenders, because they refund a little bit of the cooldown on the ability. Next up, we're going to have a quick look at the sim of my Rogue with triple Deadshot relics. Now, as you guys can see, Critical Strike is currently my best secondary stat, and here's the reason why. When you push the Between the Eyes priority so high up, you're basically making your Critical Strike rating go through the roof. So, as you guys may know, Between the Eyes has a quadruple multiplier whenever you crit with it. So if you are basically using this ability on cooldown all the time, crit is just going to completely destroy everything else. However, one thing I will add quickly is that my haste is around 1.2k. For this reason, I recommend you guys get to at least 1k haste before focusing on using this Critical Strike build. And of course, after this, you just want to be stacking your Critical Strike and your versatility as high as possible. Keep in mind that Mastery is relatively worthless, so if you can try to avoid it, please don't use any Mastery on your gear. So now we are going to be looking at some of the simulations for single target with the Outlaw Rogue trinkets. Now, as you guys can see here, for its item level, the Dark Moon Deck Fathoms is absolutely pumping everything else. This item is insanely good. It's not even an RNG trinket, you just get it, you can just buy it from someone. Sure, it might be a little bit expensive for some people, but I recommend you guys farm up the gold to get this trinket before the first raid tier, as it is completely going to be decimating everything else unless it gets nerfed sizably. After this, we are going to be seeing that 2 things dropping from world quests are going to be next. However, these things aren't reliable to get at a high eye level, so we are primarily going to be looking at the Kultarant Cannonball Runner, the Tiny Electromental in a Jar, which I will include is a very good AoE trinket, and then followed by none other than the Frenetic Corpuscle. So these items are going to be the ones that we are looking to farm, depending on if you guys are doing Mythic Plus or raiding. Now, the Tiny Electromental I would go for all AoE scenarios, and if it is a pure single target scenario, I would probably go for one of the others. It can be seen as well that the Kultarant Cannonball Runner is actually going to fall off when it comes to multiple targets, as the damage is split for this trinket itself. So if I were to rank these when it comes to AoE, I would rank the Tiny Electromental over the Dark Moon Deck over Harlan's Loaded Dice, as I feel like these trinkets are all extremely good for the Outlaw Rogue's kit in AoE DPS. For gems and enchants, make sure that you guys are using 1 Kraken's Eye of Agility for 1 slot, and then make sure that you're going your highest simming secondary stat for your other slot. Now this could be haste, or this could be Critical Strike. You guys should sim yourself and try to make sure that you are getting these breakpoints right. Now after this, if you are using your consumables, make sure that you use a Flask of Agility. You're using the Feast food if you can, but if you can't, make sure that you're using your crit food, or you are using your haste food if you are under the cap. After this, for our potion, we are in fact going to be using the Potion of the Bursting Blood for single target, and we are going to be using Battle Potion of Agility for AoE situations, as the Bursting Blood does not work as well in AoE. Now, one final tip that I'm going to have for you guys when it comes to front loading AoE damage is to make sure that you have your buffs and your combo points at the ready for when you are coming into very big mob packs. So obviously, the damage that you are going to be doing with your Blade Flurry can be easily quantified by your Blade Rush, your Killing Spree use, and your Finishers use in AoE and in Mythic Plus scenarios. So if you find that you aren't doing the sort of AoE damage that you want to be doing, make sure that you are thinking about 10-15 seconds ahead of every single situation. Now, last but not least, I'm going to be talking about two extra things. I'm going to be talking about the weak auras that I use, and I am going to be talking about some of the macros that I use for the Outlaw Rogue. Now, the weak auras are very easy. I've made these weak auras myself. There is one custom weak aura that I have taken away from the Rogue Discord. I take no credit for it. This is a really good weak aura. And basically what it does is it shows you when to reroll your dice and when to keep the ones that you have. After this, if you are going to be looking at macros, I recommend having an easy macro for swapping out your Killing Spree and your Blade Rush abilities. And on top of this, I recommend binding your unused trinkets to your Adrenaline Rush, your Blade Rush, and your Killing Spree to make sure that you are getting the on-demand burst when you need it. So that wraps up my first video for the Outlaw Rogue in this expansion. Now, of course, the Outlaw Rogue is completely pumping. It does need quite a bit of practice. However, if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comment section, or feel free to stop by my Twitch. I am streaming quite frequently at the moment before the start of Prob. So remember, no question is too silly or too much. I will try to answer them to the best of my abilities. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and make sure to make your other DPS walk the plank at the end of every dungeon.